Today we are going to focus on English vocabulary. Picture. Picture. This is a picture. Busy. Busy. This street is busy. Airport. Airport. This is a busy airport. Tall. Tall. This girl is tall. Columns. Columns. Here is a column. Big. Big. This truck is big. Glass. Glass. This is a piece of glass. Windows. Windows. I can see out the windows. Buildings. Buildings. These are tall buildings. Runways. Runways. Here are airport runways. Ceiling. Ceiling. There is the ceiling. High. High. The woman is very high. People. People. There are lots of people here. Gray. Gray. This is the color gray. Chairs. Chairs. There is just one chair here. Left. Left. The woman on the left is sitting in a chair. Young. Young. This woman is young. Woman. Woman. The woman stands. Brown. Brown. This is the color brown. Hair. Hair. Here are several hairstyles. Yellow. Yellow. This is the color yellow. Jacket. Jacket. Here is a red jacket. Right. Right. This woman is sitting in a chair on the right. Man. Man. The man looks at the camera. Backpack. Backpack. This is a green backpack. Blue. Blue. This is the color blue. Suitcase. Suitcase. The suitcase has 4 wheels. Floor. Floor. The chair is on the floor. Middle. Middle. This man is sitting in the middle. Short. Short. This man is short. Newspaper. Newspaper. I want to read the newspaper. Leather. Leather. I have a leather briefcase. Bag. Bag. I am carrying a bag. Coat. Coat. This man has a green coat. Knitting. Knitting. This woman is knitting a sweater. Needles. Needles. This woman is using needles to knit a sweater. Handbag. Handbag. The woman is carrying a red handbag. Sits. Sits. The man sits in the chair. Pink. Pink. This is the color pink. Seats, seats. There are many seats to sit in. Camera, camera. I am taking a picture with my camera. Back, back. Here is a man's back. Signs, signs. Here is an open sign. It is yellow. Black, black. Here is the color black. Way, way. I am walking down the way. Scene, scene. This is a grocery store scene. Let's look at another scene. This picture shows a busy waiting area inside an airport. This picture shows a busy waiting area inside an airport. The space is large and bright, with tall white columns and big glass windows that let in a lot of light. Outside the windows, you can see parts of the airport buildings and maybe the runways. Outside the windows, you can see parts of the airport buildings and maybe the runways. The ceiling is high, with many long lights hanging down. The ceiling is high, with many long lights hanging down. In the front of the picture, 3 people are sitting in gray chairs. In the front of the picture, 3 people are sitting in gray chairs. On the left, a young woman with long brown hair is wearing a bright yellow jacket. On the left, a young woman with long brown hair is wearing a bright yellow jacket. She is looking to her right toward the man next to her. She is looking to the right toward the man next to her. In front of her, there is a brown backpack and a blue suitcase on the floor. In front of her, there is a brown backpack and a blue suitcase on the floor. In the middle, the man has short gray hair and is wearing a dark gray jacket over a shirt. In the middle, the man has short gray hair and is wearing a dark gray jacket over a shirt. He is reading a newspaper and seems very focused on it. He is reading a newspaper and seems very focused on it. There is a light brown leather bag on the floor in front of him. There is a light brown leather bag on the floor in front of him. On the right, an older woman is sitting alone. On the right, an older woman is sitting alone. She is wearing a brown coat and has a scarf tied around her head. She is wearing a brown coat and has a scarf tied around her head. She is knitting something dark colored with knitting needles. She is knitting something dark colored with knitting needles. A large brown handbag is on the floor near her feet, along with a pink net bag. A large brown handbag sits on the floor near her feet, along with a pink net bag. In the background, more travelers are sitting in rows of seats, some facing the camera and others facing away. In the background, more travelers are sitting in rows of seats, some facing the camera and others facing away. Farther back, there are yellow airport signs with black writing to help people find their way. Farther back, there are yellow airport signs with black writing to help people find their way. The scene feels calm with people waiting quietly for their flights. Where is left? Where is left? That's right. Where is tall? Who is tall? The woman is tall. What is pink? Pink. It is the color pink. What are people? People. There are several people. What is yellow? Yellow. That's right, it's the color yellow. What is right? Right. It's the woman on the right. What is a scene? Scene. Here is a scene of people at the grocery store. Where are buildings? What are buildings? That's right, these are tall buildings. Where's a newspaper? A newspaper. That's right, it's what you read. Where is a picture? Picture. Oh, there are 4 people in the picture. Busy. Busy. That's right, the street is very busy. Where's a way? Way. That's right, you're walking down the way. Knitting. Knitting. What is knitting? The woman is knitting. Windows. Windows. What are windows? The windows look out to other buildings. Short. Short. The man is short. Airport. Airport. There are many travelers at the airport. Gray. Gray. This is the color gray. Big. Big. The truck is big. Backpack. Backpack. It is a green backpack. Brown. Brown. This is the color brown. Middle. Middle. The man is sitting in the middle of his brothers. Sits. Sits. The man sits down. Signs. Signs. Here is an open sign. Floor. Floor. The chair is on the floor. Chairs. Chairs. Here is a chair. Columns. Columns. The column towers towards the sky. Jacket. Jacket. Here is a red jacket. Black. Black. This is the color black. Needles. Needles. Here is a knitting needle. Glass. Glass. There is a pane of glass. Ceiling. Ceiling. The ceiling is high. 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 The woman is flying high above the earth. Back. Back. Here is a man's back. Hair. Hair. This is women's hair. Coat. Coat. The man is wearing a green coat. Woman. Woman. The woman is standing and looking at the camera. Bag. Bag. Here is a brown bag. Young. Young. The woman is young. Camera. Camera. Here is an expensive camera. Blue. Blue. This is the color blue. Seats. Seats. Here is a blue seat. Runways. Runways. Here are the airport runways. Handbag. Handbag. The woman forgot her red handbag. Man. Man. The man stands confidently. Suitcase. Suitcase. Here is a suitcase on wheels. Leather, leather. This is black leather. Left, left. The woman sits on the left. Tall, tall. The girl is tall. The man is short. Pink, pink. This is the color pink. People, people. Here are many people. Yellow, yellow. Here is the color yellow. Right, right. The woman sits on the right. Scene, scene. Here is a grocery store scene. Buildings, buildings. The buildings are tall. All right. Now let's do another quiz. Can you pick the right word? What is that? That is the color black. What is that? That is the color pink. What is that? That is a woman. What is that? The man sits, sits. What is that? That is a way. What is that? That is a suitcase. What is that? That is a jacket. What is that? That is a man sitting in the middle, middle. What is that? That is a handbag. What are those? Those are people. What is that? That is a chair. If you had more than one chair, those are chairs. What is that? That is a big truck. What is that? That is glass. Glass. What is that? That is a bag. What is that? That is a tall girl. Tall. What is that? That is a woman sitting on the right. The right. Right. What is that? That is the color blue. Blue. What is that? That is a man. Man. What is that? The woman is knitting. Knitting. What is that? That is a scene. A scene at the grocery store. What is that? That is leather. Leather. What is that? That is a seat. Seat. Or you can have many seats. What is that? That is gray. That is the color gray. What is that? That is a newspaper. What is that? Those are runways. Runways at an airport. Runways. What is that? That is the color yellow. Yellow. What is that? The woman is young. Young. What is that? That is a busy street. Busy. The street is busy. It is a busy street. What is that? The woman is high, high above the sky. What is that? That is the color brown. Brown. What is that? That is a backpack. Backpack. What is that? That is a sign, or you could have many signs. That is a sign. What is that? That is a ceiling. Ceiling. What is that? That is hair. Hair. What is that? That man is short. Short. What is that? That is a picture. Picture. What is that? That is a camera. Camera. Now let's connect the words and the pictures to which they match. What is this word on top? This is a sign. If you had many signs. What about this next picture? That is an airport. Airport. What is that next picture? That is the color gray. Gray. What is that next picture? That is the color pink. Pink. What is that next picture? That is a woman sitting on the left. Left. What is that next picture? That is leather. Leather. What is that next picture? That is a needle, or if you had many, it would be needles. What is that next picture? That is a man sitting in the middle. The middle. What is that next picture? That is a woman. Woman. What is that next picture? That is a handbag. Handbag. What is that next picture? That is a man's back. Back. What is that next picture? That is a chair. If you had many, it would be chairs. What is that next picture? That is the color yellow. Yellow. What is that next picture? Those are people. People. Big. That truck is big. What is that next picture? It's a picture. Picture. What is that next picture? That is a man. Man. What is that next picture? That is a camera. Camera. What is that next picture? That is a scene. Scene. What is that next picture? Those are windows. Windows. What is that next picture? That is a coat. Coat. What is that next picture? That is a short man. Short man. What is that next picture? That is a busy street. Busy. Busy. What is that next picture? That is a jacket. Jacket. What is that next picture? That is a bag. A bag. What is that next picture? That is hair. Hair. What is that next picture? That is a ceiling. Ceiling. Suitcase. Suitcase. What is that next picture? That is glass. That is glass. What is that next picture? That is a floor. A floor. What is that next picture? That is a backpack. Oh, no, sorry. That is high. High. The woman is high above the earth. What is that next picture? Gave it away. That is a backpack. That is a backpack. What is that next picture? That is a seat. And if you had more than one, it would be seats. What is that next picture? That is a way. A way. What is that next picture? The color blue. That is the color blue. What is that next picture? That is a young woman. That is a young woman. What is that next picture? That is the color black. Black. What is that next picture? Those are airport runways. Runways. What is that next picture? That is a tall girl. A tall girl. What is that next picture? That is a woman knitting. She is knitting. What is that next picture? Those are buildings. Buildings. What is that next picture? That is a woman sitting on the right. Right. What is that next picture? That is the color brown. Brown. Newspaper. Newspaper. What is that next picture? That is a man who sits down. He sits down. What is that next picture? That is a column. If you had more than one, it would be columns. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe below if you'd like to learn more English vocabulary through images.